Yes.
Are we all trying to sit in all four corners? So you balance the room out a little bit.
I know Derek will be here to break it up.
Okay. I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's April 10th, 2025. We're in the Aldermatic Chamber, and the meeting is duly noticed in two places, including the city's website in accordance with the requirements of RSA 91-A:22. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman Tim Senate.
Here.
Alderman Derek Teobo. Absent. Alderman John Sullivan.
Here.
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
Here.
Yours truly, Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien, is present. And our chairman, Alderman Richard A. Dowd.
Present.
You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 6 members present and declare a quorum. Also in attendance is Mr. Dan Healy, who is the city clerk, Jennifer McCormick, library director, Liz Hannum, economic development director, and Bobby Bagley, director of public health and community service.
And Megan, I think, is representing the
Oh,
mayor.
yes, Megan Karen, I'm sorry, I forgot. That was,
We found out last night takes all the complaints.
yes,
Inside joke.
yes.
All right. Roll call is complete. Communications?
Communications from Kenneth L. Lennox, Superintendent of Edgewood's Suburban Cemetery. Reason, fiscal year 2026 operating budget. Also a communication from Stephen A. Bolton, Corporation Counsel, Legal Department budget. Also a communication from Robert Mack, Welfare Officer, Welfare Reason, Welfare Administration, and General Assistance budgets for fiscal year 2026. And also last communication from Donna L. Graham, Legislative Affairs Manager, reason fiscal year 2026 operating budget.
If there's no objection, I'll accept the communications and place them on file. Everyone, I assume, has a copy of those, and you plug them in your book? The communications we just read, rather? I think they're part of the agenda, actually.
Yes.
All right, unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R 25-143, relative to the adoption of fiscal year 2026 proposed budget for the City of Nashua General, Enterprise, Special Revenue, and Grant Funds.
Okay, we'll be going through some departments this evening. Also, at the end of the meeting, we'll take a motion to table this resolution, and we'll take it off the table for every other budget meeting we have. Okay. So the first, Division 101 is Mayor's Office. Appropriations are on page 46.
Ms. Karen, when you speak, can you give your name and everything, just in case the transcriber doesn't know which voice is which? They know our voices, but.
Yes.
And if you all, when you come up to testify, if you could follow that suit, would be appreciated. It makes Donna's job a little easier. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you. For the record, my name is Megan Karen. I'm the Chief of Staff. I am here before you this evening to present the Mayor's Office budget. Before I do that, I did speak with the Mayor, and I would like to make one clarification to his comments that he made on Tuesday evening. He mentioned that the proposed budget before you does not include the elimination of any positions. As you know, getting to 3% with salary increases is difficult. So I will let Director Bagley speak to the details, but this budget does include the elimination of one position in community services, I believe. Turning to the mayor's office budget, in order to meet the 3% guideline, we made 2 reductions. The first being in the internship program, which is $10,000, which was unfortunate, but we took this as an opportunity to kind of revamp the city academy. So we've opened applications for that. And like I said, just another opportunity for civic engagement. We've done some outreach to the high schools, and we're hopeful that we can get folks of all ages involved. So that is a shameless plug there. Lastly, we did reduce our dues and, our conference and seminars by about $3,700. And so we are right at the 3% guideline. I actually think we're $8 under. With that being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions on the mayor's office?
Excuse me.
No? So everything beyond the paper and all that stuff is all covered in that 3%, so
Yes,
supplies.
yes.
Okay. All right, and again, when we're going through these different budgets, we don't touch on benefits because that's calculated separately and provided based on whatever budgets end up, so we don't ever discuss benefits. Yes, Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to that point, I shouldn't, because when I look at the original budget in '25 and the mayor's proposed budget of '26, it's actually a 4% lift, but you're backing up benefits from that number? Okay.
Yes, that's why I mentioned it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, if there are no questions, thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Okay, the next, is the Board of Aldermen. That was a memo that was submitted. And if there are any questions on that, we can bring them up at one of our wrap-ups. Same thing with the legal department. They were fully explained, just the salaries. So the next item we're going to look over is 107 of the city clerk's office. Revenues are on page 8 and appropriations on page 49.
Good evening, Dan Healy, City Clerk. So my budget is coming in about $90 under the 3%. What I'm trying to do is, our budget would fluctuate year after year with it, depending on how many elections we have. So in those off years, I'm looking at purchasing additional election equipment. So this year, the biggest increase in the budget is going to be under equipment. I'm looking to purchase 28 poll pads. So what those do is they allow a voter when they go into the polling location to go to any line, and it's not separated by letter. So I'm looking to slowly implement those throughout the city, throughout the wards. 28 would get us about halfway there. The vendor recommends about 55 for Nashua. My plan, if they are approved in the budget, is to hopefully get them in time for the November city election and have 3 wards running with the poll pads, get those people trained, and it'll give us kind of an idea of how they will work. A lot of communities are switching to the poll pads. The only downside with using them is that there still has to be a paper backup, so it prints a receipt. You have to have people in the back actually marking the paper checklist, but voters are able to check in a lot quicker. I know at Ward 4, the line for one of the letters was down the hall, wrapped around, and out the front door. So the other few letters that they had there, the other stations, had hardly anyone going to them at that time. So this would alleviate some of the lines on election day. So that's the biggest increase, but overall, my budget is still under the 3% because it's about I think around a $50,000 reduction in election workers for this upcoming year due to not having as many elections. And I guess I'd be open to any questions. That's really the main thing that's in my budget.
I was going to recommend that those pads go towards 7, 9, and 2.
What about 5?
You're at large.
I still live in Ward 5.
I did have ideas on where I'd like to implement them, and it was going to be Ward 4 because they had the line out the door. I'd like the staff there to get kind of used to them. Ward 5 being the biggest location, and the Ward 8 moderator had asked specifically last year for poll pads, so I think he would be.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm just letting you, those were just my thoughts on where I'd actually implement them, but.
Questions for, yes, Alderman
Thank you.
Kelly?
Applaud you for knowing your budget down to $90.
Yeah.
Very nice. I also appreciate the effort to try to make sure there's not a huge fluctuation, because I know off years are a little bit easier on you. It is budget related because you're asking, but I'm really interested in the poll pad. Is it an actual like iPad, and what is the technology like?
It is an iPad. So I guess another downside to the poll pad is it would come with a service contract, but it would be something the vendor would manage. So our IT department would have no involvement with the actual poll pad because it's just used strictly for elections, but each one annually would then be $300. It's not in the budget this year for the maintenance because I believe with the tabulators, we're getting new tabulators. The first year is free for the maintenance. So it would then be $300 per year for the maintenance on the tabulators. But then if anything breaks, we're covered and we'd get replacements. Our vendor's actually LHS out of Salem. They have the poll pad on their website. I think it's it's called No Ink is the vendor, but it is an iPad. Comes with the iPad, a printer, a stylus. So it basically sits on the table in front of the ballot clerk. Someone comes up with their ID. It has the ability to scan the barcode on the back, and all it's doing is not save. It's pulling up that voter's info that's already on the poll pad. If a voter doesn't want that, they can manually key it in. But it only takes a few seconds when the voter comes in, but it is an iPad.
Can I have a follow-up, please?
Follow up, Alderman Kelly?
It's a question I said I would ask everybody based on things that are going on above us. If the SAVE Act were to go through, do you anticipate more need for staff or more processing time at the polls?
So the SAVE Act includes a lot of things that already passed in New Hampshire last year. So with HB 1569, the state of New Hampshire voted to remove the use of affidavits. It was signed into law by then Governor Sununu about a week after the general election, or it went into effect a week after the general election. When he signed it, it was intentionally so it was passed that time frame, so it didn't go into effect for that election. But we're currently already dealing with a lot of the major issues that the SAVE Act would have. We haven't had an election since then, but anyone that doesn't currently come to the polling place now with proofs of everything would have to be turned away. So we've had a few people in our office that come in, they don't say have their birth certificate, we have to tell them they need to go get it, when in the past, they could just sign an affidavit and state under penalties of perjury that, you know, they were born in the United States or that they're a U.S. citizen, that they got naturalized. Now they would be turned away. Prior to the SAVE Act being voted on, our U.S. Rep. Maggie Goodlander actually reached out to a few clerks, and I had a Zoom call with her earlier this week, and we went over all the reasons why it's not good for New Hampshire, but New Hampshire passed it anyway. So we gave her our talking points, and she was meeting with reps. Obviously, it didn't go the way that we wanted, but New Hampshire currently already follows that. There are challenges to it. The ACLU is going to be challenging or has filed challenges, but now with this, potentially if the SAVE Act fully goes through, then it would be two sets of challenges. But our clerk association and myself, we were strongly against it. It disenfranchises voters, but we have to work with whatever the laws are. There were a few voters, there were towns that had town elections in March. There were voters that were turned away that had to come back. It was a much smaller election. Most people probably registered in November, so the registration numbers weren't high that day, but people were turned away. People who had to go home, come back to the polling location, so.
Well, maybe we can work together if that happens. We can try to pre-educate people. But
Yes.
we're all hoping it doesn't.
And as you know, we have a new member of the Board of Registrars, our library director, so that will help a lot, so.
That's true. Thank you.
All set?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yes, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of house cleaning items. We're also joined this evening with Alderman Tom Lopez, and also who is online, and also Heidi E. Peak Kukla of Public Health and Community Services Division.
And Don Enright, this is treasurer, is also.
Oh, excuse me, yes, Don Enright, City Treasurer. Welcome, all.
Okay, any questions? Alderman Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking ahead to the future in a conversation that's been going on, I actually had come in here presuming that 65,000 here on your equipment line was for new tabulators, because I know that's been a conversation that's been ongoing for a while. I know that's eventually going to come down to the pipeline, because those AccuVote things, as you know as well as I do, are, well, they're antiquated.
Yeah.
What's the estimated timeline on ultimately upgrading that equipment? Because I imagine, I know it's not here, but that's going to eventually be a big lift for you.
The tabulators? Mm-hmm. So that's already in process. So where we are with that is the Board of Aldermen in 2023 approved the use once they got state approval. Mm-hmm. The prior city clerk had already escrowed the money for the purchase. And about a month ago, I presented to Finance Committee, which got approval there for the purchase. Where we are now is the legal department and the risk department have been reviewing the contract. I've sent our edits to the vendor, and it's basically just kind of agreeing to the contract. And once that's signed, we'll be able to purchase. So it will be before November. So we'll have them for November.
Oh, very cool.
And a few other communities have already implemented them. Where I live, they used them for the town election, and I ended up volunteering for that day. So I've used them at the polling location, and they print results way faster. You can print 5 tapes in like 2 minutes instead of that long. So there's a pretty, it's a pretty significant upgrade. I went to a few trainings too that they had, but those, we're at the final stages. Once we get the contract back with whatever they accepted or didn't accept, I'll have legal just give it a once-over. But as I've told them too, there's only 2 vendors that offer this. There's only 2 that are approved. So they're kind of tied by the manufacturer and all that too. So there's not a ton of changes that we can really do that they're going to approve, but legal has added a few things that they have agreed to. I'm just waiting to get the final back, and once we get it back, the mayor will sign, and then I think it would be probably within a few weeks that we'll get delivery. And they know that we have an election in November, so.
Great. Thank you so much.
All set? Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, just as a point of order, I just wanted to clarify that, first, that I am alone in the room. I can see and hear everything that's going on, and I'm just here because I couldn't arrange transportation to the meeting with my work schedule and haven't made it on time. I did have a question for City Clerk regarding the poll pad. I imagine that we didn't just pick iPads out of nowhere. This was an RFP process from that, and then also, is there any concern that the tariffs or any increases or changes in price might affect us? Because as I understand, there's a company that manages these. Is it going to be similar to the school district bus system, where then they're in a position where they can renegotiate or increase prices?
So we have a very good relationship with the vendor. They haven't indicated that there's going to be any increases. Right now, we only have a quote, and I've been working with them, letting them know that most likely we're not going to be able to purchase all of them in 1 year because of the amount. I believe the full quote is 135,000, somewhere around there, so for 55 of the tablets. Once we sign the quote, I don't believe the prices can increase after that point. But they haven't indicated that there's any increase coming. There's only a few vendors, I would say, that are approved, or devices that are approved to even be used for this process. A few other communities have used, it's a laptop version. In a prior community, I tried to get a quote from the vendor, and they were unresponsive. I'm fairly confident in the vendor that we would be going with. It's the same vendor for the tabulators. They're out of Salem. It seems to be that the majority of communities are going with this, with the iPad version. And I'd have to look at that specifically. I think it might be, it might even qualify for the sole source or a waiver, because there's not really, really a strong competitor that's kind of up to the same level as these iPads. So I can definitely look into that prior to any purchase, but I think that they're probably the best vendor, and they're the vendor that also has our tabulators as well. So I'm trying to keep everything with the same company. So if they come for service on our tabulator or our poll pads, I mean, it's basically an all-in-one thing, and they can get here in a half hour.
Is the selection and approval of these at the state level?
I believe they have to be approved by the Ballot Law Commission, similar to the tabulators.
Okay.
I just know that the iPad version, this version, is probably the most popular. It's the most widely used in New Hampshire. And I know that other communities have had issues when they gone with something else, just on the service and the resources, when this vendor is, always available for any issues.
Okay. All set, Alderman Lopez?
I have a follow-up, actually.
Sure.
So just to summarize, there wasn't a formal RFP process, but you're very literate in the subject, and you've done a lot of research in this area. And then you'd also said before you purchase them, would it be possible to get a communication confirming that these are the only real best option before we do the budget wrap-up?
Yes, I think that would be possible. There is another vendor that I think is working on something that's still kind of in testing trial mode. So I guess probably work with legal and see about getting some type of letter that they're pretty much sole source, or the only ones that really are fully approved for use.
Okay. All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions, the city clerk? Seeing none, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item we'll be discussing is Department 179, National Public Library, revenues on page 34, appropriations on page 102.
Okay, Linda Laflamme, I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees. And I have with me today our director, Jen
Just have
McCall.
to turn your microphone.
Yeah, you gotta have his microphone pointing at
You gotta
you.
bend it.
Oh,
Bend it
oh,
down.
There you go.
there we go.
Now we got you.
Too much. Too much. Up again. All right. Okay, try that again. Linda Laflamme, the chair of the Board of Trustees for the National Public Library, and I'm here with our director, Jen McCormick, who once again has done a great job balancing the needs of the library, the Sunday hours, and the realities of trying to keep a aging building operating with the 3% cap. So take it away, Jen.
All right. Thank you. Jen McCormick, I'm the director at the library. Our budget did come in right at the 3%. I think we were $200 under, or $204 to be precise. We did set some priorities for ourselves in drafting this budget proposal. One of our main priorities was maintaining our year-round Sunday hours at the current level of 4 hours per week. For the current budget year, we had only budgeted for 3 hours instead of 4, but we did increase during the year based on public demand. So our overtime budget, Sundays are an overtime situation for our staff. Those hours are in addition to their regular hours. So you'll see that our overtime budget did increase, I believe, 15% to keep that 4 hours per week year-round. Another priority was to maintain the current staffing levels, and we were able to do that by leaving one part-time vacancy unfilled. So we had someone leave mid-year, and I left a part-time position vacant in anticipation of a tight budget year. We did need to increase our utility budgets, particularly our electric budget. That should be no surprise to anyone who uses electricity at home. And we also wanted to include funding to continue recarpeting on the main floor and continue our project. We've been converting our fluorescent fixtures to LED throughout the building. In order to reach that 3%, we made some reductions. In the book line, we shifted our ebook expenditures entirely to the trust fund, so we were able to make a reduction there. A couple of other lines were able to reduce just due to actual spending. Things came in a little bit less than we had anticipated, including our software licensing line. We negotiated a new contract with our integrated library system vendor this year and found some savings there. You'll also see reductions in dues and memberships and in miscellaneous supplies. Miscellaneous supplies for us, those are operational supplies, and we did a major project with relabeling and barcoding this year. So we had bumped that budget line up last year, and we're able to bring it back down. There are a couple of other decisions we made to reach that 3%. We did postpone plans. For this year, we didn't plan to install keyless entry on our exterior doors. It's not a project that we can pursue. We reduced our programming budgets by a small amount, and our Friends of the Library will make up for that reduction. And the trustees had budgeted some money for potentially a fundraising or development consultant as we work towards a renovation project, but we chose to, eliminate that for this year. So in conclusion, the library will be open the same hours with the same number of staff. We did make some small reductions, and for anyone who's concerned, we really, I promise, will replace the rest of the ugly carpet on the main floor. Happy to answer any questions.
So if the board sees fit to replace your manual HIVAC system, that you
Yes.
explained at CIC. Would that have a cost savings on heat and
I would
electricity?
anticipate, yes. I would anticipate that, but hard to see from here how much that would be.
Yeah, okay. Other questions for the library? Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on line supplies and materials, line 61107, clothing and uniforms. And I don't remember anybody wearing a uniform in the library, so I just wonder, I'm sure it's something, but.
Right. Jen McCormick, Library Director. Those are uniform shirts for our maintenance and security staff,
Okay.
and some baseball caps.
That works out good, yeah, thank you. It's a nominal of $750, so, yeah.
Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Director McCormick, you had touched on staffing. There was a part-time position that was unfilled, that there was some attrition and you're not going to fill it. Can you just give me broad strokes? Because we don't have the full-time employee supplement yet in the book.
Okay.
I'm just curious to know, where are you for staffing levels? How many do you have, full-time, part-time, et cetera?
Excuse me. Excuse me. I wish that I was prepared to answer that question precisely.
Okay.
We have, when we are fully staffed, there are 41 bodies in the building. I believe that is the equivalent of 35 FTEs.
Okay.
So we have, if I can count quickly in my head, 1, 2, 3, 4 part-time employees, and the rest of us are full-time.
Okay. Thank you.
All set?
Yep.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director McCormick, I had a question on the very last section of your appropriations, 71,000 equipment. There's a jump from 35,000 last year to 50,000 this year. However, from your presentation and what you had told me going on with the carpeting, I noticed that building and grounds maintenance is actually down from last year. Am I correct in assuming that the equipment is the carpeting?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
All set?
Yes.
Alderman Lopez?
I just had some questions about the reference made to increased electricity costs. I thought the city was doing a collective aggregate rate that was lower. Is the library not included in that?
We made this decision based on information from the purchasing department that we should expect overall about a 40% increase in supply and distribution costs.
Okay, and that's not, is that citywide? Because I thought that we had locked down some kind of contract previously, and I'm curious, again, you are part of the collaborative city building charge, right? That's not the library exempt or anything?
I believe so, yes. The communication was to all city divisions.
Okay.
That's it.
Do you know what I'm referring to? The contract that Doria Brown worked out, that locked in the rates before they started to go up, I think it was 2 years ago?
Well, I believe that contract, I don't want to say expired. I can't really answer this fully, Alderman Lopez. We just operate with the information that we get from purchasing about the expected utility changes.
Okay. I mean, I guess when they come, they can tell us.
Yeah, all the utility information is provided to the divisions to use for their budgets. All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, I just wish extension cords from the hydroelectric jam behind the library, but whatever.
Run a direct line. Alderwoman Kelly?
Yes, thank you. I also loved how closely you knew your budget. I noticed in previous years, under revenue, you had sale of books. You don't have it this year. Is that just sometimes you have them, sometimes you don't, or did you stop selling books?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the sale of books, people might think that is the Friends book sale. That is not. The sale of books, we have in some years sold copies of The second volume, the second part of the history of Nashua, and the title is escaping me. It was written by
I can see the
reference
cover.
librarians. It's a beautiful cover. We do have many copies in the building. We just have not sold them the last couple of years.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another one that came up to me, and you can correct my memory if I'm wrong. I seem to recall earlier this year that certain e-services that were available through the library, for some reason my brain is telling me Hoopla, but
Yes.
I can't recall exactly, were discontinued. I can't recall what the reasoning, what that was, but I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit and looking ahead, speak to any services that may be offered beyond the, say for the sake of argument, 4 walls of the library. You have many more walls. Any services that might be at risk, given the nature of things as they're developing, whether it be in Concord or in Washington.
Thank you for that question. So you are right, Hoopla was discontinued, I think 2 years ago now. That was a different pricing model than our other digital offerings. So through Libby, you can also get ebooks and audiobooks. Libby was, Hoopla, we had a limited number of, for lack of a better word, checkouts per month. We paid, I'm just throwing out an average price, we'll say $2 per checkout. I don't really recall what the number was. It was even at an expenditure, I think we ended at, we were spending 30 or 35,000 on that, and we were only serving a couple thousand customers. And what we were really doing is generating several thousand unhappy customers because we were at our limit, our daily limit, sometimes before 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So the other way that we provide digital content, and I want to start by saying in fiscal year 2024, the circulation of digital items was 25% of our whole circulation. So we circulated 398,000 items in fiscal year '24, and 100,000 of them were ebooks and audiobooks through the Libby app, which is an Overdrive product. We have access to those materials through the statewide downloadable book consortium. So there are 206 or 208 libraries that participate in that. We collect funds based on a formula, and those funds are used to purchase content for all the libraries in the state to share. Nashua, additionally, we have a separate Advantage account, and the trustees use trust funds from the Stearns Trust to purchase additional copies of the really big bestsellers to try to bring the wait list down. So hopefully, Tim, whatever your bestseller novel preferences, you might only have to wait for 6 or 7 people and not 35, 40, or 100 people. So that's a great service, and I wish I could recall, I think 5,000 or 6,000 unique customers borrowed digital items using that service in the last fiscal year. The state library contributes to that consortium. They pay the platform fee for the software, and they also pay a staff person to administer the contract and manage that service for the state. So to answer your second question, the funds for that platform fee and that staff person come through the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So that cut on the federal level to that agency could directly impact in a very negative way that downloadable book consortium, which, our Nashua residents borrowed 100,000 items from last year. The other service that the Institute of Museum and Library Services funds at the state level is the interlibrary loan system. And I do not have a good number for that. I know more than 5,000 or 6,000 items went out and came in through the interlibrary loan system. The state uses those IMLS funds to pay for the software that allow libraries to access each other's catalogs and process those transactions. They also pay for van drivers to move those materials throughout the state. So I don't know yet, and the latest word I got from the state library just this morning is they have not heard from the IMLS that all of their funding has been cut off or will cease, but once it does, there really is no established mechanism for either one of those services to continue. The final answer I have is the state library also uses IMLS funds for the talking book service for the blind and handicapped. I don't know how many Nashua residents use that. I do know there were 1,000 users in Hillsborough County. So,
Well, thank you for that very thorough answer, and I really appreciate you touching on the accessibility of materials for the deaf and blind in particular. I alluded to this the other night, but an area of, or an aspect of downloadable books that folks may not be fully appreciative of. It's not just the wave of the future. We want things on digital mediums versus paper, but it's a significant advantage to folks who do have vision challenges. My son in particular is able to blow up text as large as he needs it to, and sometimes it seems like he's got like 4 lines on a paper, but he still whips through a book. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for the very well thought out answer.
you're welcome.
Any other questions? Do you anticipate any logistical concerns, or more importantly, any budget concerns when they start the project outside your front door?
Oh, that's a great question. I believe that there will be a brief period of time where the library will have to imagine a different entrance for customers, but I don't anticipate any significant closure of any significant length.
Okay.
Up top, Mr. Chair.
Alderman Lopez again.
Alderman Kelly first.
My colleague may have asked the question, but I'm going to ask it a different way, just so that I'm very clear. In terms of the cuts to IMLS, has that affected your budget at all, and how have you made up the deficit if it did?
So, no, it has not affected our budget, and I will let Linda answer about what the Board of Trustees has discussed.
Yeah, we, Linda LaFlamme, Chair of the Board of Trustees for the library, we did discuss at the last meeting what could be done perhaps by leveraging trust funds to keep the downloadable consortium afloat. Because we all felt that having access to the ebooks and the cost of Nashua trying to replicate what we have access to now through the state would be prohibitive, but perhaps if the platform fee is not prohibitive and something that could be perhaps absorbed through trust funds and working, and then from there, working with the other members of the consortium to see if perhaps we can do something to keep it afloat. But right now, that something is as vague as the fate of the funds from the feds, so.
So I hear you saying, and I appreciate that answer, that, I mean, it sounds like that cut tends to hit more rural libraries, but it sounds like for us, it's mostly around these ebooks and that kind of access that we use the money for.
Yeah, the interlibrary loan is a tough one, because that needs somebody, some centralized location that can act as the hub for all of that and can actually, drive the stuff around the state. So we're looking more at, what could Nashua, as the largest user in the consortium, how could we help, how could we support and spearhead so that not only our patrons can benefit from it, but we can be a good neighbor to, the much smaller libraries around the state. Jen quoted 206 or 208 members. There's only 236 libraries in the state, so it really would be a big hit. But budget-wise, I think the trust funds could help us out. And we are, the trustees are also working, or thinking perhaps, rather than working, of ways to leverage the trusts more for content and programming so that the city's funds coming in through the budget can be maximized for the maintenance and the renovations that are so sorely needed. Because we realize that, you know, we do have a lot of funds that have built up. Some of them have constraints on them as to how they can be spent. But those that don't, we are looking at creative ways to use them, such as those that were destined for books and reading materials when they were instituted back when that meant paper. Now we're looking at buying the ebooks and the tablet gizmos, play along.
Oh, Playways.
Playaways,
Yes.
thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you for that answer. I really appreciate you being as thoughtful and creative, and it makes me proud to think that my city is thinking about how can we help the others who are going to be more and more impacted. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
All set, Alderman Kelly? Alderman Lopez?
So to what was just said, I would see advantage if we can figure out how to become a leader in that. If the state doesn't want to be a hub, then maybe some of the other communities would, at the very least, underwrite our own expenses and having more control over that media. To what was being discussed earlier about talking books, obviously I grew up on talking books because I was legally blind, and I can speak to the emotional content, the value of being able to listen to a book being read to you versus having to struggle to read it. Even large print, even, you know, I've done both. But being able to hear it being read is very important. And when you're talking about people who are considerably more, you know, challenged than I was, it's a connection. You know, I taught kids at a summer camp for several years that were, you know, from all over the state and struggling with all kinds of levels of visual impairment. And they really, the one thing they had all in common was everybody had a talking recorder, and they all were listening to those books, but they felt a sense of connection with other people because they could hear people reading them. I found out as an adult that was mostly people in the prison system, but regardless, the idea of a voice being able to read it is a very important one for people who can't see the world around them. So, point out, a lot of those books, well, not a lot, but I have found personally that several of the books that I grew up on, you know, probably up to 7 at least, aren't on Audible and aren't in other formats. And, you know, I always kind of wonder whatever happened to all those tapes. So to that end, it would be important to, if we could, just because it's material, it's literature, and we don't want to lose it. But Director McCormick, did they convert a gallery to the online consortium you're talking about, or?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think you're asking is, did they convert the talking books materials? Are those available in the downloadable consortium? I don't think so, because
it goes back. So they used to be on records, and then it was on cassettes. And I don't know that they ever actually converted the records to the cassettes, but it's a massive body of that. If it was converted, that kind of speaks to the importance of trying to preserve it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, all set, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Senate, did you have another question? Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next department that we're going to be discussing is Economic Development, 183, and their appropriations are on page 55.
Liz Hannum, Economic Development Director. We recently completed our economic mobility strategic plan, and so that's really where a lot of the budget has been targeted this year. I moved some things around, but we're right on target for our 3%. So we moved, we're going to do a study That's a skills gap analysis, and that kind of is the first step in completing a lot of the other steps within that economic mobility strategic plan. And so, as well as our recruitment strategy for new businesses, both small and large. So that's kind of the first step. So I got quotes around $25,000. So I lowered my consulting budget to match that one thing, and put the remaining into the marketing budget, because we'll need to actually execute once we have our strategic, or once we have a recruitment plan. And then the majority of the rest of my other contracted services line item, which is the largest line item in my budget, I did plan for the barriers again next year. But with the difference in the program, I could reduce the cost quite a bit, because we don't have as many restaurants participating anymore. So as of right now, to give you an idea, we're at about 44 barriers when we normally are at 125. So so we're about a third of what we anticipated for this year. And then the last kind of big item within that other contracted services is another strategic item from our economic mobility strategic plan, is the Financial Empowerment Center. So we will be contracting that to a nonprofit partner. And so we as a city need to put something into that. And so that will come from my operating budget. And that, the amount of support we've gotten for that one item within my budget is amazing. We had a site visit from the nonprofit that funded our planning efforts with a $20,000 grant. And we had 40 nonprofits show up to learn about it. And we've had constant requests for more information since then. And we really see it, I guess I didn't realize this until that meeting, but we really see it as a way to help free up some capacity within the nonprofits in the area, because they won't have to spend the time teaching everyone within their service area to budget and to be more conscious of what they're spending their dollars on. So that is where we're hopefully gonna spend more time and energy, is individual economic development, as well as real estate and more traditional economic development. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Alderman
Whoop.
Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Barriers, that's your line for other contracted services?
Yes, it's within that, yep.
Okay. Could you give me a rough estimate, what portion of that?
I believe I'm at 35,000.
35K?
That is significantly reduced from last year.
All right. You had mentioned 44 barriers. How many restaurants does that comprise?
Gosh, I think it's gonna be 6 this year.
6 restaurants.
7, maybe.
6 to 7. All right.
Yeah. We are finalizing the plan at the moment, so we may have one or more additional. So we might need more barriers, but that's what we've got for right now.
Call it a tolerance of 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have until May 1st to decide whether or not they want to participate.
All right. Could I ask one more?
Follow up, go ahead.
Thank you. And you had mentioned a contribution towards a nonprofit for the services that they'd be providing. Is that the dues and memberships I see jumping from 3,000 to 15?
No. So that is within my other contracted services budget as
Okay.
well. So I had put 25,000 in there for that. And the dues and membership increase is because I think there was an issue with it moving, the specific dues, which was the Milliard Association fees, moved into another budget. And I think that it somehow got back in my budget this year. which you can see the actual was 13,000, so I was way over my budget this year. So I essentially budgeted too little last year, because the previous year was, I think, 15,000 maybe? No, 26,000 was 2024, and we had moved all of that into something else, and it ended up back in my budget, so I overspent this year on that item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I get, Alderman
I
Kelly?
had a question. Yeah, I had multiple questions. Okay, so barriers we talked about, it sounds like maybe price drove that down, but you said it was about half of, more than half or less than half?
Yeah, about a third.
Okay, and we went up double, right? It was like 500 to 1,000?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
I know the Financial Empowerment Center, you just presented on it. Is this a physical place we're talking about?
It will be, yes. So we're hoping to locate it kind of permanently within the library or the senior center. We haven't quite figured that out yet, but we will be also co-locating is what they were calling it. So we'll essentially, in order to kind of make it sustainable, we'll charge a fee for like the hospital, and 1 day a week they'll go meet with hospital employees. So we'll kind of co-locate within that. We, as the city, would be managing the Financial Empowerment Center, and then we would be contracting the actual day-to-day with the nonprofit. So we're running it, which is why it has to be in our budget.
Okay. If I had one more follow-up.
Follow-up?
And then the new thing that I know you guys have as well is the block party trailers.
Yes.
Which I'm hoping to help pilot. We'll have to talk about that in a bit.
Yep.
The cost for setting those up and like managing that, is that just wages and salary, or do you have additional line item for that?
No, so that is also within the other contracted services. So I'm anticipating, the DPW has generously offered to move the trailer wherever I need it, at their expense. And so my expenses that I'm budgeting for are just kind of replacement items, as well as gas for DPW.
If I could follow up,
Follow-up?
just because it's topical. If someone wanted to borrow it, what's the process?
Yeah, so we're about to launch the website, so it'll be on our city site, and you can go reserve it as long as the date is available, and we've got people that we can move the trailer to you. It'll be $100 an hour to use it. We're still kind of workshopping that. That might end up going up or down depending on usage, but that will cover the cost, I think, of most of our issues at the moment, but or any kind of replacement items. But yeah, so that they can apply online, and then if they would like to close streets, they'll have to go through the special event permit process, the street closure process. But if they're looking to have it in a park, then they would just have to go through parks to reserve that space. Yeah.
All
Okay.
set?
I'm good, thank you.
Alderman O'Brien, did you have something?
I did have one more.
Yeah, I did. Ms. Hannum, you know my affinity to the barriers. I designed that past program.
Yeah.
I hate when people shoot themselves in the foot, you know what I mean? But this board decided to cut back, and I'm hearing from restaurants that they are no longer interested because to put the volume of tables out there, they're not hitting the mark. So, does this, in your division, have an economic impact negatively? In other words, people aren't going to get the permit fees and everything else like that. Do you anticipate some loss?
I think it will kind of end up being a wash because we've doubled the cost of the permits with probably a third the number of restaurants. So it might have a small impact, but not much. But we are seeing that it is going to impact the restaurants, because we essentially, what we did was cut the space by 2/3 and then doubled the cost. So we essentially made it 6 times more expensive to to have that space. So, so some restaurants are deciding it's worth it to have the vibrancy and excitement outside, to kind of draw people in, and some are not. So it's kind of, we'll see how it goes this year, and see what participation we get in the future years.
Yeah, and follow up if I may. Yeah, I'd be very interested in that, and I'm sure you'll be in communication with me on it. Maybe we can address some of the silliness, but the thing is, I like the way it was. You cut down Main Street to 2 lanes. I've seen many people almost get hit. People don't press that yellow button and cross, and you get the outbound lane coming through like it's the DW highway, which it once was. But, you know, it's Main Street.
Yeah.
And it should be follow the traffic pattern. So to me, it's kind of shameful, but thank God we doubled the cost, so with a negative balance. Imagine if we didn't do that, there would be a loss. Thank you.
Yep.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. Could you please, you mentioned it earlier in your presentation, but can you just, I was just looking at the professional and technical services section, that went up about, by my math, about 44% over last year when you take into account the entire segment, both the consulting services and then marketing and public relations.
Yeah.
Can you just walk through one more time, please, what that is? And because you had mentioned something about the mobility study. Is that the branding study?
No, that's something different.
Okay, so if you could just please
So essentially,
recap and-
yes. So essentially, I'm trying to do both things, the economic mobility and the marketing study. And so I lowered the contracting services line item by 7,000 because that's what I'm seeing for quotes for the skills gap analysis. So I didn't need all 32,000. So I moved that 7,000 into marketing and public relations. And then I lowered my other contracted services by almost $20,000 and put most of that in the marketing line item.
And so the marketing and public relations, that's where the branding study's gonna,
Yeah, yep, so that's gonna be things like small business recruitment guides, materials. It's gonna be ad buys specifically for retail development. And then that's kind of gonna be a very small start to what we're planning.
okay.
Yep.
All set? Any other questions? I have one. We charge $1,000 to the restaurants for the barriers, and you're picking up in your area the cost of putting the barriers down. Why aren't the revenues of the restaurants going into your department as revenue?
Well, they're going into the parking department. So they sort of are, parking is underneath me, so they sort of are. But essentially, we put them in the parking because we're taking up parking spaces, and we're kind of replacing that revenue. So it's going into kind of the special fund that allows us to do maintenance going forward.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none? Thank you.
Yeah.
The next group that we're going to be discussing is Public Health and Community Services. First is Community Services, 171, and Community Health, 172. Revenues are on page 21, and appropriations on 84. Yes, go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you. Bobby Bagley, Director for the Division of Public Health and Community Services. First of all, I'd like to do, it's not a shameless blast out, but it is National Public Health Week, so I'd like for us to celebrate not just our public health department, but all of you as well, because you're a part of that public health system. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the department heads for working with me and also with Janet Graziano with Megan Karen and with Dawn Enright to get our budget at 3% as directed. And what we're going to do this evening is that I'm going to have each of the department heads speak to their individual budgets for their departments. I'm going to start first with community services. Overall, what we were able to do for community services to come in at 3%. Community services came in at a -1%. Community health at 5%, environmental health at 5%, and welfare came in at 3%. So we were under by 1,954. As the Mayor's Chief of Staff, Megan Karen, noted earlier, we did, in order for us to come at 3%, I did reduce one of the community health worker positions in order for us to meet that directive. I'm going to go through the community services budget so that you can also see some of the line item changes that were needed for this to happen as well. So I already mentioned under 5,100 is the salary line where you can see that there's a decrease, and that's because of that community health worker position. This is one full FTE. You'll also notice under 53 where it's professional and technical services, accreditation, there is a fee increase, and so that went up just a bit from 56 to 6,200. As our city continually grows, the accreditation is based on the population size, so as our city continues to grow, we get thrown into a particular category for the fee increase. You'll notice also under 54 where it says property services that has been decreased. The electricity and water has been taken out. That was decided to move it to, I believe it went to buildings, and the question was, why did we have electricity and water being charged in this budget when I don't believe anybody else's departments work that way? So that was moved out, and it's now being covered under another budget line item elsewhere. You'll notice also under 55, where's other services, there's a significant increase for the cell phones, and that is because of the increase in the staffing. The staff is in the field quite a bit, and so the cell phones, which are used for most of the communication, whether it's checking emails or connecting directly with other service providers or clients, so that reimbursement for the cell phone stipend is there for the staff that use their phones in the field. You'll also note that under conference and seminars, employee training and certifications, that is up just a little bit. And again, when you have individuals that have certifications, such as myself, we have to maintain continual education units to keep our certifications active. And also the training and conferences allow for my team to continue with their workforce development as well. You'll note under other contracted services that line has that amount, that 2,300 has been taken out. And that is because some of that money was used to help support our medical director, Dr. Granick, but that is now fully covered under community health. And under supplies and materials, which is 61, you'll see that there are some increases in those lines. So under the community services for office supplies, the entire division's supplies are under the community services budget if it's not covered by grant. And I do believe that community health has an office supply line under grants, and so that's kind of offset a little bit, but I did have to raise that up to cover the other departments in the division. You'll also note that there's a small increase under marketing and outreach. It looks like it's an increase, but it's actually down, 2 years before, it used to be up to 8,000, so it's at 6,500. The majority of the work that we do around prevention and education, primary prevention starts with creating health promotion messaging and awareness. So we do quite a bit of marketing. You've probably seen with some of our billboards on DW Highway, on East Hollis Street coming over. So that's how we get information out. We sometimes leverage that with some of our grants. Since some of our grants are going away, I did add a little bit more into that line so that we can continue some of that information sharing. Miscellaneous supplies will help us cover some of the activities that we do during the summer fun. Again, some of those things may have been leveraged under some of the grants, but we want to make sure that we're able to continue to support those activities during summer fun. And the other line that you'll notice under other expenses, that looks like is down where it says negative 25,400. This is an offset that we usually have as a result of some of the grants that we have. They help with the indirect cost allocation, and because the grants have decreased, that line has also decreased. And that is the justification for some of the changes and what I have here for community services. And I'm not sure if there are questions all that for each department or.
One question
no.
I had is electricity and water is listed as 0.
Yes, it got moved to someplace else.
Okay. Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Could you, under the indirect costs allocation, could you just explain what that is, what you get reimbursed for, what service that actually is, so we can put some color to just
Sure.
indirect cost allocation?
Sure. So that indirect cost allocation is usually what I can charge against the grants. I might charge either 3 to 5% to cover the indirect costs on each of the grants that I typically do receive. And then that offsets the cost here, under other expenses under the city budget.
Just a follow-up.
Follow-up?
So what service are you providing for that? What are you
Which
doing
grants?
to get the money back? Just like what service are you performing for the community?
So there are several different grants that we may have. For instance, under our Public Health Emergency Preparedness Grant, under the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services, under that grant, under our Continuum of Care grant, the total amount of whatever that budget might be, 3 to 5% of that I charge as indirect against those grants. That then offsets the cost for here in the city. So it's put into our city budget to be used. That's why it says negative 25.
Okay, so you're helping people, when you say emergency preparedness, maybe prepare for a snowstorm, or, that's what I'm trying to get at. Like,
Yeah, so-
what are the actual,
Services.
yeah,
Okay, so with that grant, typically what we're doing is providing a great deal of education and awareness of how to be prepared for any type of emergency event or response. An example would be during COVID. And so during COVID, we wanted people to know how to protect themselves against the spread of that infectious disease. And so through emergency preparedness, we had staff that actually participated in some of the clinics that we did, that ran some of the testing sites, that helped coordinate some of our volunteers. So those are the services that are provided under public health emergency preparedness. It's done in collaboration with community health. It's done with our other staff that's under community services. I mean, it was all hands on deck, but that would be an example. So if that grant was, and don't quote me on the amount, say if it was $283,000, I would charge like 3 to 5% against the cost of that total grant as my indirect. That would then offset some of the city costs.
okay.
For the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services, that's usually the work that we're doing around substance misuse, tobacco cessation, reducing adolescent risk for suicide. So any of those prevention activities would come under that particular grant. And it would be very focused regionally to those population groups. So anything that has to do with substance misuse, whether it's the distribution of information around languages and dealing with that vulnerable population. Narcan training, working with our partners around the distribution of Narcan. Work that we do with some of our unhoused populations, and things that have to relate to mental health. So those would be those services. A lot of the work that we do is around health promotion and education, so that staff will go to meetings, present information, present data that may come back from, say for instance, AMR that talks about how many overdoses we've had or how many deaths we've had. We have a a subcommittee that meets. We provide information to that particular group of service providers, and then we come up with strategies for how we're going to reduce deaths from overdoses. With the continuum of care, that's usually looking at the services that we have in our region and making sure that those services actually exist and that there's staff that can provide the connections or resources to individuals that might be struggling with substance misuse, that may have mental health issues. And so again, it's bringing, as the conveners, bringing all of these providers, these service organizations to the table, coming up with a strategic plan, and then operating that strategic plan to reduce whatever is looking like the rates are going up. So if it's increase in suicides, we pay attention to where that's happening, and then we put out educational information around that as well.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
welcome.
Thanks.
Okay, Alderwoman Kelly?
Okay, I'll start with the easy questions. So community health worker, you said you had to reduce. I know we got a memo from the mayor around helping in the immediate response. Is that the person who was cut, or is that person staying and this is just an additional person?
So for the memo that was sent out was with regards to the cuts from the federal agency, CDC, through our pass-through to the state. So that was grant cut fund, that $80 million that was taken back from the COVID dollars and the COVID vax dollars. That's separate from this position. This is a city-funded position under our general fund that's being cut after June 30th of 2025. So that position won't exist in 2026.
If I could follow up.
Follow up?
What was the line item cost and what impact will that have to your services?
So the line item cost for this staff is about $57,000, between 5 and 8, 57.5, 57.8. The impact is with this loss of this position, in addition to the 3 positions from the grant funds, it then cuts that workforce down to half, so from 8 to 4, which is going to have a significant impact on some of the services that are provided by the community health workers in the community. So this is our team that's boots on the ground, that do the soft handoffs between making connections with agencies, with individuals that may have some difficulties navigating some of our systems. So community health workers spend the majority of their time in the community with individuals that are our elder population. We have taken on a MOU with Meals on Wheels, and so when individuals are not there when they go to deliver their meals or something has happened, the community health workers, instead of the police, we now go and we'll make the connection to find out where was that individual. Our community health workers team up with our service providers from Harbor Care, from the National Soup Kitchen and Shelter, from our community health workers that are part of community health to provide services in the community on the mobile health van. They support the clinic services that are through our community health department, through immunization, case management, STD, HIV. And so that's going to have an impact on the ability to have the magnitude of reach that we had in the community. I think for me, the major issue is that the community has now gotten used to that resource that we won't have. And so we're going to have to look at how we're going to manage some of our ability to do that work in fiscal year 26.
People will fall through the cracks. Can I have a follow-up, please?
Follow up?
Hardest for last. So you talked a little bit about the federal slashes and what that means for you specifically. Can you talk about, I know that it is very typical in our state that we rely very heavily on nonprofits to fill some of those gaps. You don't have a crystal ball, but can you talk to a little bit about what kind of referrals you do and what that might change look like if we're not funding, certified health centers, that kind of thing?
So that's a very good question, Alderwoman Kelly. And so what we've been able to do with having this, the community health worker staff, is we've been able to sort of leverage where some of our partnering organizations didn't have that workforce to get out into the community. So over the past year, we've seen an increase in the staffing support at some of these organizations. The impact of the loss that we suffered as a result of the clawback of that funding from the CDC has also impacted those organizations as well. So our nonprofit organizations are going to be in a predicament where some of them have already lost staff because of that. And then with some of the other cuts that are going to come through at the federal level and even at our state level, if certain things pass in the current budget, it's going to have a huge impact on accessibility for individuals in our community. Our most vulnerable populations won't have access to services, may not have access to health care, are going to suffer from child care loss, and some of the other funding that supports quite a bit of support and services for some of our most vulnerable populations. That's going to include children, it's going to include families that have lower incomes, it's going to include our elder population. We have the fastest growing elder population in the state, and so there's going to be a huge impact on our community overall. And as we reduce our workforce, then there's going to be even greater issues for some of the staff, some of the agencies having the workforce to meet the needs of their constituents. And then there'll be some work, because some of these organizations are going to try and provide the services, and it will be uncompensated. And then what that will look like is that we may end up seeing increases of folks accessing the emergency rooms for services because they won't be able to get some of these services through our federally qualified healthcare centers.
Thank you for your answer. Sorry, it's so bleak.
Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, so I know we have the wrap-up session coming, but particularly that position for the community public health worker is something that I'm hoping we can find a way to put back into the budget. This is not the time to lose the public health, the community health workers. As Director Bagley had pointed out, whenever you have upheaval of programs, whenever you have a major player, like when a decade ago now, when Harbor Homes in Greater Nashville had a major change in who could provide MIMS and functional supports workers. Whenever you have organizations that go under, like Stepping Stones, the people who need them the most in the moment that they need them don't know that's happening. And they use the last of their resources, whether we're talking financial or whether we're literally talking emotional. They make one last try at connecting with services or support, and then they find closed door, or they find out that there was an opportunity that they missed because some other terrible thing was happening to them, and their phone was dead or something. So the community health workers are the solution for that. They're a person that becomes known in the community, is active as an ambassador, is actively going out and engaging not only people that are in need, but also are engaging nonprofits. And so when program opportunities open up, somebody moves out, somebody graduates the program, somebody has success or even a setback, organizations look to fill those gaps as soon as they can. And it's in the best interest of the state to have a very strong workforce of community health workers that can be those liaisons and make those connections. Because often the difference between having somebody who's able to connect with health and the support programs they need, and 5 or 6 years from now be successful or effective, contributing back into the system, and somebody who just never makes it out, it can be a matter of a day or an hour where somebody just didn't know where they were or couldn't connect them. So I think those positions are extremely important. I think I hear, as the alderman for the western side of the downtown, frequent concerns about how people become visible in the summer, either rough sleeping out on the sidewalks, or panhandling, or any number of things where they're trying to solve problems that there are normal solutions for. And this offends people who are trying to go about their business to make their money or operate their stores. A space where there's a lot of people trying to do different things at the same time. And we've benefited tremendously over the last year with the community health workers. A lot of businesses have struggled with it nonetheless, but given the amount of increase we've been seeing in people who are homeless, people who are struggling with recovery, and people with unmet health needs, the community health workers have been stemming the tide. So this affects a lot of other areas. When we try to do branding, when we try to do the needs assessment, when economic development and community development and the other departments are trying to do their work, public health has been essential in making sure that they're able to do that. So I think this is something we have to look at. So I wanted to be very clear that that's something that I'm going to consider a very high priority. I do have a question to the tune of that instability and that fluctuation for Director Bagley. I'm looking at the welfare budget line items, and I noticed that in the I'm looking at the actual used through 2025, some of the items, looks like we have used 419,240 for shelter assistance, for example. Medical assistance is only 20. These numbers seem fairly wild. So in your opinion, are these consistent with previous years' decreases? Or are there some areas that might be performing differently in different ways?
So with the
Go ahead.
Director Bagley, answering for welfare as best as I can. So with the thing with our welfare budget is that, you know, sometimes there's unpredictability here, Alderman Lopez, because from year to year, we may not know what things are going to look like or what we're going to need with regards to providing assistance across, whether it's for shelter, medical, utilities, food, and you will see those numbers go up and down and fluctuate depending on what's happening. I can't speak to the number of years going back, but we know that right after COVID, there were still a lot of resources that were available to people in the community, so they didn't have to rely on our welfare assistance as much. I do anticipate that with all of the things that are that can happen coming down the pike over the next 3 or 4 years, we might see a need for some increases in some of these lines. I do believe that when Bob Mack, who is our welfare officer, put some of his numbers together, he was seeing a downward trend in some of the utilization of assistance funds. For me, I can't see a continuation of a downward trend with some of the changes that are going to come down the pike, and so I'm hoping that we will have what we need to provide the services for people in our community, and I believe that because of the legislation that's in place for welfare assistance, we have to provide it. I'm hoping that this budget covers what we need for right now.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It does, because I think the point that I was getting at is, to quote Alderman Dowd's most famous saying, there's a lot of unknown unknowns, there's a lot of variables when it comes to human service. I believe it was last year where we had an intersection of not only ARPA funding for people who were receiving COVID monies run out, but we also had like a 3-year Chekhov's gun of, we had done a massive effort in the nonprofit sector to do rapid rehousing, and the rapid rehousing grants expired in 3 years. So those two things intersected, and then suddenly our, and it might not have been last year, it might have been the year before, our city welfare's assistance budget just ballooned, because suddenly we had a massive population that was converging on, you know, a system that was designed, we would be doing business as normal. And I believe we tapped heavily into the welfare's trust fund. Have we done it to replenish that, and do you know how much is left in that?
So,
Yes, go ahead, Director
sorry,
Bagley.
Director Bagley. So I do believe that there's probably about 84,000 that's left in that. We have not had to use any of the funds that are in the welfare trust last year, and we don't anticipate having to do so this year. And I do believe that we've had some conversations about adding some additional funds back into that welfare trust, but I don't know where we are with that.
Well said, Alderman Lopez.
Would it be your opinion that I'm sorry, yeah, one more follow-up. Would it be your opinion that we should look at some kind of contingency funding, given that there are so many like dynamic variables I think earlier, like even a couple months ago, there was a panic when freezing federal suggested that a bunch of the housing vouchers might be affected by that. If any of those types of things happen, or if criteria eligibility for things gets adjusted, say, to exclude certain populations that are no longer a focus of our federal administration, we're still happy. So I know we have the trust fund. Do you think it's adequate, or should we look at either trying to deliberately put more in the budget or contingency fund so that if the sky falls, we have arranged for a plan?
Director Bagley?
Director Bagley. I do believe that it would be important for us to look at adding money back into the welfare trust fund if that is possible.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for this area? You want to go to your next area, Director Bagley?
Yes. Community health?
Sure. Good evening. Kim Bernard, Chief Public Health Nurse. I will be presenting our budget for the Community Health Department. Thank you for this opportunity. I'll first start on page 21 with our revenues. As of 3/31, we've exceeded our predicted revenue thus far by 12%. Our goal here is to create opportunities to capture more revenue through multiple sources and potentially double our revenue for the fiscal year of 2026 while caring for our most vulnerable in our community. Some highlights include implementation of the ability to accept credit and debit for our clinic fees. Previously, we were cash only, as I reported out last year. Some challenges include that our insurance billing coding training is on hold until this summer due to some staffing challenges, and also the inability to draw revenue for program funds versus it going directly to the general fund. As a reminder, we do ask for a small fee for our clinic services, but no one is turned away for inability to pay. Are there any questions on any of the line items?
Any questions on revenue? No?
Before I move forward, okay. So I'll move forward to page 84. Our initial budget drafts were, as you can imagine, it was difficult to bring our percentage down. So I was working between 8 and 11%. And the reasoning for this was I was trying to take into account potential loss of grant funding. I'm presenting a department budget of 5% minus benefits, but I am concerned about having operational funding gaps that could potentially affect services to our community. So I'll start with salaries and wages. We are up 7% there. In total, up 47% with our overtime, per diem wages, and a few other things. Per diem wages, excuse me, per diem wages are for our per diem pool, which includes 7 nurses that we have in that pool. We also have some grant funding, which again I'm concerned about, which covers per diem and nurse practitioners and a physician for our clinic. Property services stayed about the same. We do have, you'll notice it's down for disposal services. We do have some money in the special refund, special revenue funds line, so we're able to use that towards our disposal services. Everything else is pretty much the same. For other services, we're up 74%. There are some challenges here. This is some areas where I've put some funding into particular lines in case we do lose grant funding, and a few of those lines are our telephone cellular. As Bobby had mentioned earlier, well, most of our staff are in the field, so what we'll be doing here is decreasing the amount of reimbursement, and also some of our hotspots will be getting rid of. We have to have hotspots for our outreach as well as our EMR. We have Wi-Fi within the building, but it can be spotty, and we need to have consistent Wi-Fi to be able to use our EMR. Another area we had to decrease was some conferences and, the employee training and certifications. We do need those funds because we do have the majority of our staff are licensed or have certifications. And we added a line called software subscription services, you'll see, and that is for our EMR, and that covers the full cost. And our other contracted services is fully for our medical director, and we did increase his salary by 13%. We haven't increased his salary in many, many years. Supplies and materials, we are down in this area, about 75%. We do have some grants that we can utilize, some grant funding that we can utilize in some of these lines. Did decrease our vaccine line because we are implementing a new program surrounding vaccines where we'll be able to get our private vaccines from a vendor, so we will not have to utilize that line for those. And educational supplies, we increased that line. And then under other expenses, our program expenses line, that is for anything that we may need across our programs. And again, I'm concerned about grants, so I would like to have, I decreased that line, but I would like to have something in that line. And we also added a special events line, which will include outreach and special events that we do in the summer, or like our Valentine's Day event and costs surrounding that. So we were able to come in, our department, at 5%. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions? Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you. Early on, you mentioned gaps in services. Do you have an idea of what those gaps might be as we
Sure.
sit here today?
So we, as Bobby had talked about with our partners, we serve as a safety net for our community in terms of services surrounding sexual health, immunizations. So if there are decreases in funding, say for our partners and us, there could be an increased need and there would be gaps in services. We currently, most of our grants are under the infectious disease grants from the state. So we have grants for lead poisoning, where we case manage children. We have grants for HIV and sexual wellness and prevention of STDs. We also have a program that isn't grant funded, but we do utilize funding from our grants to purchase things like HIV tests, HCV tests, which is hepatitis, and we also have grants surrounding immunization. So we are hearing things that these grants may be in jeopardy at the federal level. So we are concerned regarding that, because if we don't have those funds, our city funds would not cover those services to the fullest.
Follow-up, please?
Follow-up?
When we talk about grants and all the different services, are you able to put a number to that? I mean, let's say we had to cover it here at the city level. I mean, what are we talking about for investment?
So our grants, as well as operational costs, do include 3 grant-funded employees. We have 1 medical assistant, 1 community health worker, and a part-time RN under those grants as well. So our total grants amount are around $270,000 for FY26.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. All right. Environmental health?
So we do have our health officer, Heidi Peak. She's on Zoom, and she'll present her budget.
Good evening, Heidi Dakota, Nashwa's Health Officer. If you can't hear me, could you let me know? The
No, we can hear you.
internet seems, you can?
Yes.
Yep. Oh, excellent, thank you. Okay, I would like to start on page 22 to discuss our revenues.
Okay.
And we we're actually doing really well with our revenues. And we've made some changes to the food service fees, so that has increased and it continues to increase. We will be coming to present changes to our spa and pool licenses for our fees fairly soon as well, so those increased. And the rest are pretty much in line. The solid waste licenses are due by the end of June, so we will see all of those as well. I didn't know if anyone had any questions about our revenues. Also includes our violation revenue.
Any questions on revenues? Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Pig, we discussed barriers earlier, and your division goes and does the outdoor dining, correct?
We have a minimal role in that now. We are mostly concerned at this point because the infrastructure is fairly set. We do want to make sure that no one is storing any foods, beverages out. And we also want to make sure that that the capacity isn't exceeded because that affects the restrooms inside.
Okay, follow up if I
Follow up.
may. But many of these restaurants, they get a permit for the outdoor dining, and would that be a loss of revenue to your division?
No, we don't add that as an additional revenue source for us.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
all right. Appropriations?
And
Right, thank you.
Alderman Lopez, did you have a question on revenue?
Yeah, because I realize it's kind of not the part of it at all, but in terms of staffing, and I don't know if this is the right term, but is there a return on investment regarding inspection, whether it's restaurants or whether it's occupied buildings or dwellings? Does that actually bring in more spent on the staff that are doing it? Because my understanding is there's much more capacity of need in the city than we're able to easily address.
let me try to, oh, right, Alderman Dow?
Yes.
I jumped the gun, sorry.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
Okay,
Answer his
thank you.
question, yeah.
So return on investment, certainly everything that we do, every touch that we have within the community should be benefiting a business owner, whether it's educational or sometimes trying to correct what they're doing. So certainly the more that we're out there, the better off the facilities perform. We've demonstrated that. We do our frequency of inspections according to what's listed in the model, the same that Portsmouth and Manchester do. And so every time we have a touch point, it just increases knowledge or some aspect, so it really does strengthen the business's ability to keep what's served to the public safe.
I was thinking more of a fiscal component. Can we afford to add people to better engage the community and to better address public safety in a revenue neutral manner? Or does adding another to do more inspections, does the training and the upkeep and the oversight and benefits and all that make it cost prohibitive?
Well, I don't see, I've never looked at it that way. I know that according to the FDA guidelines within the food code, we should probably have certainly a few more people. one of the things we do is issue tickets, and that's the violation revenue. And unfortunately, that is the one thing that affects change often more than education, but we are very cautious about educating people prior to issuing a ticket. So I don't know the direct correlation between the two things.
Okay, just to elaborate on the reason I was asking is because I'm looking at how difficult it is to manage a budget this year with threat of reduced federal and state resources. I can't imagine that it's going to get any better next year or the year after. I think it will probably get worse. And also see a number of new residential programs opening up. Against all odds, there's a lot of new restaurants opening around the city. And my understanding is we're behind the curve in a lot of areas in terms of inspections. We could be doing more, and as you mentioned this, we probably should be doing more, assuming there's still an FDA. So in looking out for our city, I think it's important for us to start thinking about, okay, what do we need to have versus what can we afford to have? And how do we make up the difference in that gap? I think part of that might be taking a good look at some of the stats and making sure we know how much they cost versus on paper. Because if you look at an expense and you say, okay, well, an inspector costs this much, and you don't account for the revenue that they're generating, unfortunately or fortunately or whatever, they're still catching things that are happening. They're still documenting needs in their education community, but they are offsetting their own expense. And I think that's something that we need to start thinking about specifically with public health and environmental health. Because, in my time as alderman, relative to, some of the other people sitting around the horseshoe, I think public health and environmental health have been treated as an amenity or a luxury and a prerequisite for keeping a city healthy and functional and not having an explosion of outbreaks.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Lopez. All right, do we want to go into appropriations?
Can I respond to his comment?
Sure.
One of the things that in this budget cycle that we had to eliminate was a software package which would have boosted our efficiency greatly. I think we're one of the last jurisdictions to be conducting paper inspections. And it would have just streamlined what we do. It would have added to our transparency. We could have queried things, we could have analyzed numbers. We can't do that with the current software that we have now. So we are very disappointed that we have to eliminate that from our budget. And I think that it would be, we're still going to try to figure out to afford it, but that was a really hard thing for us. We're very grateful we're not losing anyone, but that's pretty hard to swallow.
If I may just comment on that, Alderman Dowd, I'm sorry.
No, we're going to move it along as fast as we can here. Go ahead.
I just think multiple members of the board, Alderman Kelly, President Wilshire, will probably recognize the discussion of that software from the many Human Affairs Committee. We've talked about needing a better reporting and then tracking mechanism.
Okay. Alderman Kelly?
Just to follow up to Ms. Peak's comments, could you just let me know what the line item budget for that inspection software is? If you don't know it off the top of my head, you can send it to me.
Should I answer?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. What the amount is?
Yes, please.
Do you have the amount of the software package?
Bobby might know.
Oh,
Ms. Bagley does, I think.
So for,
Yes, I do. It's $15,300 per year based on the number of licenses that we would require in the department.
Per year? Thank you.
all set?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And we've gone to the Capital Improvement Committee for the the fees associated with just getting up to speed and configured.
Thank you.
Director Bagley?
And the amount, Heidi? Sorry, Director Bagley. And the amount of that, Heidi?
Of the implementation fee
Yes.
was $22,500.
So
Oh, no, sorry, $20,250. And if I may, I'd also like to point out that this would also support our pool program, our septic program, rabies, and our institutional inspections, solid waste and complaints. They also have a module for special events that I know we've really been challenged with trying to streamline those.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Wiltshire?
Thank you. Thank you, Heidi. I was wondering if you could tell us how many restaurants are inspected, including, you know, like where I work at the children's home, because I know we have 2 food service licenses. Can you just give us an idea of how many restaurants you guys have to inspect every year?
Roughly 525.
Oh, that's more than I thought. Thank you.
Okay. All set. Then we move on to appropriations.
Thank you. Yes. Let's see. I'm going to go over some numbers real quickly. This was a real challenge for us to come in 3 or under. We actually came in at 5%, and we just couldn't cut any more than we did. And I'll go down our lines of what the differences were. The mosquito surveillance stays at $1,350. I know that the vendor had wanted more money because of her costs, but we will to start later in the season. And we're a very small department, and most of what our budget is salary. Then our telephone for cellular went up by $50. Our dues and our membership went down to $500. We had projected $750. We have accredited positions, registered environmental health specialists, and some food protection certifications as well that we maintain, and it has to do with our accreditation. So we'll have to prioritize some of those dues and memberships. And similarly, we also reduced our conferences and seminars by half. We were awarded part of what we asked for National Mental Health Association and FDA grant, which will pay now for one person to attend a national seminar, take care of a whole bunch of the required CEUs. And our postage and delivery went up a little bit because we end up, since we do most of our licenses on Lawson, we end up mailing a lot of those out. So we see that is an additional expense. Our protective clothing has gone down, and we reduced our laboratory supplies. And similarly, our laboratory equipment, and we had asked for overtime because we do use overtime for after-hours events or for within licensed facilities. And so that is no longer reflected in the budget.
Okay. Questions? Seeing none? Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
Okay. Welfare submitted a letter, so we don't need to go over 174, 175. Are there any last-minute questions for Director Bagley?
I have one.
Alderman Senate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Bagley, if I could, I would just I want to cycle back. I just want to make sure that I got my notes correctly. The line item cost of the Community Health Department employee that you're anticipating losing, I had 57.5 thousand, 57.8 thousand. Is that correct in your estimation?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And if that position were added back in, we would come in as a division at 5% instead of 3%.
All right, thank you.
Alderwoman Kelly?
So my question, I know you said we got a memo from welfare, but I did have a question. I feel like I bring this up every year, but I want to ask anyways. Under assistance shelter, it's under 55. The cost is up to over 558,500. Is that only when we shelter those when we don't have room in shelters? Is that hotel line cost?
Y'all do, hey, yes. Director Bagley?
Yes, Director Bagley. So yes, so this would support when individuals come in, if they need support with their first month's rent or security, it supports that. It also supports any motel stays as well.
And I know you're not welfare, but if I could do a follow-on.
Follow-up?
We had a report that came out in December saying that we are the state that has the highest increase in homeless population, with a 52% increase. Do we think that's a sufficient line item, given that statistic?
Director Bagley, or do you want to defer to
She can't answer.
the person that
Okay, you don't
submitted?
have to.
Well, Director Bagley, I will say that when we did put this together, I had put in a higher number in this line for rent and shelter. But as I mentioned earlier, when the welfare officer ran some of his numbers, he saw a trending down. But I was anticipating what might happen or what could happen in fiscal year 26, so I actually had this number higher. But this is what the welfare officer put in, because we, again, wanted to make sure we could come in at 3%.
Thank you.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Ms. Bagley, I hate to ask this question, but I did hear in several of the testimony from your individual directors of their particular, divisions. In total, how much are you over the mayor's request of the 3%? I mean, I understand the cost of doing business is the cost of doing business, and we are required to provide some assistance, but I just wonder, what is the total amount that we're looking at?
Looking at a percent or a dollar amount?
Percent.
Director Bagley?
Yes. So when we worked through our original budgets, looking at what our actual needs were, we came in at about 13%.
13%? Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Just one quick follow-up?
Certainly.
Thank you. Director Bagley, thank you for taking the follow-up, too. So any play with the 13% is definitely going to hurt your division and hurt citizens, are less fortunate, correct? Yes, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Director Bagley. Thank you.
Alderman Dowd?
Yes, Alderman Lopez?
All right, I had a follow-up question for
Quickly.
Director Bagley before she goes.
Go ahead.
And I'll see the comment, even, it doesn't matter what your pay grade is or whether you're less fortunate or not, if there's a bed bug outbreak, everybody's getting it. But Director Bagley, we asked about percent, what would the dollar amount be? Because I think it's important to know the dollar amount versus the percentage, if you can ballpark it, because the community development isn't as big as some other departments in the city.
Yes, go Director Bagley.
Director Bagley, so Alderman Lopez, the 13% was the overall for our division, but each department's lines came out at different amounts. And so we would have to get that information to you at a different time, because I don't have that written out that
Yeah,
way.
if you can provide that information to Donna Graham, and
Yes.
she can get it to the alderman.
Okay, so we can send our original budgets that were put together, and then you'll have this as well.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So that wraps up this evening, so I need a motion to table R25-143.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make the motion to table R25-143 to the next meeting of the Budget Review Committee.
Motion is to table R25-143. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. New business ordinances,
There are none?
tabled in committee.
Nothing?
General discussion.
I thought tonight, Mr. Chairman, everything went pretty good, except I would like to just bring out something. In the cover letter that we received from Edgewood's and Suburban Cemeteries, I noticed something in the second paragraph, and it says, "This spring," if I can quote Mr. Lennox's letter, "This spring we will lay out the last of the space we have for casket lots at Edgewood and Evergreen Cemetery. Then we'll have no more space left to sell lots." Then on the back section, last paragraph, it says Edgewood Cemetery could possibly be sold out in 1 or 2 years for traditional burial lots. Evergreen Cemetery could have 1 to 3 years left. Further discussion with the city should include land for a new cemetery. So it sounds like the time is nigh, and I think our citizens deserve a proper burial. I think I'll be talking to Miss Karen to have a discussion with the mayor on this. But where I am chairman of infrastructure, I wonder if that comes under lands. And, you know, I don't think any of us here ever purchased a cemetery before. You know, most of this was done, you know, way long ago in boards. So I'd like to move this up from what he has stated, up to somewhere on the burner that we will look at this and work on.
We can discuss it at one of the wrap-up meetings.
Good, very good, thank you.
All right. General discussion, aldermanic comments? Seeing none. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 9:02 PM.